Etrian Mystery Dungeon is a hybrid crossover of the Etrian Odyssey series and the Mystery Dungeon series of games for the Nintendo 3DS. Etrian Odyssey is a fairly long-running series from Atlus that began life on the Nintendo DS and features old-school style dungeon crawling and RPG elements very much in the vein of the venerable Wizardry series and other early RPGs. Hallmarks of the game include intense difficulty and the need to manually create a map of the dungeon as you go along. The Mystery Dungeon series by Spike Chunsoft put down its roots all the way back on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and has appeared on most every Nintendo console going forward, as well as a few PlayStation entries. While not every entry has made it to the West, many notable releases in this franchise of roguelike games have found their way over here. Previous entries have featured crossovers with Pokemon, Dragon Quest, and even Chocobos, but the default protagonist has always been Shiren. Mystery Dungeon games revolve around exploring randomly generated dungeons, finding loot, and dying a whole lot. So what do you get when you combine these two games? Well, depending on your point of view, you get an Etrian Odyssey game with some Mystery Dungeon trappings, or more accurately, you have a Mystery Dungeon game featuring elements of the Etrian Odyssey series. At its core, Etrian Mystery Dungeon is a traditional Mystery Dungeon game, but the classes and character customization are lifted right from the Etrian Odyssey series. That means you'll be rolling with a party of Landsnecks, Hexers, Dancers, and Protectors, among other traditional Etrian Odyssey classes, and with them comes all their associated class abilities and powers. Like other Mystery Dungeon games, your party will be tasked with venturing to the bottom of a series of dungeons to complete missions for people back in the town. For the most part, that's all the narrative you'll get out of this game. Neither series is known for its epic stories, and that continues here, with the general plot being rescue this person from the bottom of the dungeon, look for this bad guy at the bottom of the dungeon, or just get down to the bottom of the dungeon. The town of Eslarga is your base of operations, and as such it's a way station for adventurers who come here to brave the mystery dungeons. It's loaded with helpful townsfolk. You start your game in the Explorers Guild, where you recruit your party to take with you on the latest adventure. While you can have a roster of 10 adventurers, only 4 can come with you at any given time. You can mix and match classes as you like, both in your current party and in your guild roster, although with more than 10 classes available, it's likely you won't have more than one of any of them. While there is a wide range of classes to choose from, you'll almost always want a combination of a Landsneck who will be your main tank, a medic for healing, and a rune master for spellcasting. That 4th spot is the wild card that you can use to rotate in your Sovereign, Wanderer, or Ninja, depending on what you think you'll be facing in the coming dungeon. Up to 5 default squad setups can be saved, and easily recalled from the guild to save time when you want to make changes. While only 4 guild members can be questing, the others can still gain experience by being sent to protect forts that you can set up in a dungeon once you've explored it. These forts will give you a way to make sure your unused characters are able to stay close in level to the rest of your party, and are an important aspect to balance throughout the game to make sure you have properly trained and equipped members when you need them. Besides the guild, there's quite a few other places to visit in town. You've got your RPG standards like the inn for resting and storing items, the store for buying and selling equipment, and the laboratory for researching new information about dungeons. There's a restaurant for getting food that grants buffs as well as offering the occasional quest, and Megan's house where you'll receive most of the story-based stuff. The town is handled in a simple menu format which makes moving around and restocking your party a relatively breezy experience. Early on in the game, there's a mechanic introduced which allows you to upgrade various shops in the town to allow them to offer a wide range of services or to stock higher level items. There's 10 upgrade paths for each shop, and by the time you reach the upper tier in all of them, you'll have opened up a great deal of options for helping you deal with the harder stuff in the dungeon. So what about when you leave the town? You probably want to know how the game actually plays, right? Most of the action revolves around a turn-based tile system where each space you move or action you take costs a turn, and then the enemy gets to move. Although this game is described as a roguelike, it doesn't share everything in common with its PC predecessors. There's no need to worry about identifying what every item does, and there's no fear of permadeath. When you die in Etrian Mystery Dungeon, you merely return to the town, heal up, and go back for another run. It does, however, share the roguelike quality that when you die, the dungeon respawns, all your progress is gone, and you're basically in a whole new area once again. This can be pretty frustrating if you've gotten all the way down to the bottom only to find yourself all the way back up at the top when you return. Another similarity to roguelikes comes from the fact that early on, you're not very survivable. Until you've leveled up some skills, gotten some more healing, and gotten better equipment, most likely you'll die a lot against some of the early enemies. What can make it even more difficult is the fact that once an enemy kills one member of your party, they often level up and become a super enemy that becomes essentially unbeatable to the rest of your remaining characters. This led to many frustrating deaths to me early on as I just couldn't get going. Once things got rolling, however, the game became much easier and I found myself dying far less as long as I took the time to use the tactics that were available to me and constantly make sure I was using the best weapons I could. Like some other RPGs, while you have 4 characters in your party, you actually only have direct control over the main character. This means when it comes to things like healing and spellcasting for the rest of your party, it's up to the AI to decide. While it does interrupt occasionally to check to see who you want to heal or who you want to target, in general you have to rely on them to do all the dirty work for you. Leading is tiring work, however, and very quickly your leaders get tired. Thankfully you can rotate them in and out with a few simple button presses, and this is something you'll have to pay attention to, as a tired leader just won't be as effective in combat. Early on you'll level up rather quickly, and as you level up you'll be able to assign points to about a half a dozen skills for each character class. As those skills level up, they'll lead to opportunities for other, more powerful skills to become available, and as those level up, they'll even reach a highest tier of skills where you start to be able to do some pretty serious damage to entire swaths of enemies at one time. Dungeons can range anywhere from 5 to 20 or more floors, almost all of which consist of 8 or 9 rooms connected by a series of corridors. Within those rooms you might find anywhere from 1 to a half dozen or more enemies, at which point you'll find yourself in combat, which of course is the heart of Etrian Mystery Dungeon. The key to combat is the placement of yourself and your party. In general, your party just follows you in a straight line, so if you take just one step into a particular room, the rest of your party will be waiting ineffectually out in the hallway. Spellcasters might still be able to cast from back there, but any other melee attackers are going to be stuck watching the fight doing nothing. Therefore, it's imperative for your leader to get in a flanking position and allow enough room for the rest of the party to surround your enemies. You can do that by either just walking around the back yourself, or issuing a command for the party to spread out. In addition, there's a system called Blast that lets you either take direct control of your party for a few turns if you have enough of it saved up, or allows you to issue a few other tactical commands. You earn Blast by fighting enemies, but mostly by stepping over special gold-colored tiles that are scattered throughout the dungeon. Using Blast isn't necessarily something you need to do throughout the game, but it's definitely something that'll help you in some key situations. There's actually a great number of surprisingly detailed systems within Etrian Mystery Dungeon, many of which will seem obtuse to people who aren't familiar with the series. Thankfully, there's a pretty robust system that describes everything that's happening in the game, as well as a monster tome and item almanac that you can use to find out what things do, what weaknesses enemies have, and what attacks they generally use. Make no mistake though, this isn't a game for casual gamers. It's a hardcore experience, and as someone who spent a lot of time with roguelikes dating back to the original Rogue itself, as well as old school RPGs like Wizardry, you'd think a game like this would be right in my wheelhouse. But I still found myself struggling at times to wrap my head around everything that was happening, and to really get in a groove and keep from just dying to some seemingly simple monsters. Having spent some time with earlier entries in the Mystery Dungeon series, I can safely say that this is one of the most complicated and difficult ones yet, and that's kind of saying something for a series that has never been known for being a walk in the park. However, if you're a fan of either the Mystery Dungeon or the Etrian Odyssey games, you're probably going to find a lot to like here. There's hundreds of floors to explore, tons of equipment, lots of skills to level up, and the random dungeon design leads to almost infinite replayability. In a nod to the Etrian Odyssey games, the boss battles actually shift to a traditional first-person RPG view, and you can issue commands to your entire squad, like you would in your average JRPG. When you come down to it, I had a great time with Etrian Mystery Dungeon. Sure, the sameness of the layouts got a little boring, and I do wish that the enemies had been a little bit more robust, but overall, this was an interesting combination of two different genres that worked really well together, and it'll be interesting to see if this turns out to be the only entry in the series or if we get more Etrian Mystery Dungeon down the line.